Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fueling the Future Alternatives webinar. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Daniel 6A. I am the Chief Operating Officer at East Tennessee Clean Fuels. We're one of about 75 clean cities and communities coalitions operating across the country to assist fleets like you in switching away from costly and dirty fuels like gasoline and diesel towards cleaner fuels like propane, natural gas. Fleet managers like you right now are facing more fuel choices and more pressure than ever before. And today's session is built for those real world constraints, hitting sustainability targets, protecting uptime, reducing your fleet's fuel budget. And so those funds can be put to better use elsewhere. We'll spotlight three fuels today: propane, autogas, compressed natural gas, and liquefied natural gas that working fleets are already using to lower the total cost of ownership, to simplify maintenance, and meet emissions rules. And we'll move past lab chemistry into the nuts and bolts questions you might ask about alternative fuels projects, station footprints, payback periods, technician training, and driver acceptance. Propane autogas, or LPG, is a low-pressure liquid fuel that already powers over 50,000 U.S. school buses across the country. On-site skid tanks cost between $10,000 and $30,000 for a first run, and fuel runs about $1.50 per GGE, about $1 per or so per GGE under gasoline, and engines meet low NOx standards with no aftertreatment. There are also renewable propane options that come out of the production process from producing renewable diesel, and renewable propane has started to be used across the country as well. Compressed natural gas, or CNG, compresses pipeline gas, stuff that you hear about in the pipelines, to 3,600 psi and can power refuse trucks, transit buses, utility fleets, and already does nationwide. Stations are a bit more expensive, but they are usually large-scale implementations. They usually cost between $1 and $2 million, often with some grant support available, while fuel generally is between $1.50 and $2 per diesel gallon equivalent. That's what we've seen in Tennessee anyway. And then there's liquefied natural gas. That's essentially what, rather than compressing it, you chill it until it becomes a liquid. Those stations are a little more expensive. LNG has some real benefits over CNG depending on your use application, and we'll talk about them today. And last but not least, there is renewable natural gas, which comes from landfills. It's methane that is going to be emitted anyway. Landfills, wastewater treatment plants, dairy farms, all of those are going to be producing methane that, if left to release into the atmosphere, is going to be worse for us than if we collect it and use it in our fleet. It is free fuel waiting for us to take advantage of, and it is often carbon negative as well. So over the next hour, our speakers are going to map these broad strokes onto lived experience, sharing lessons learned, pitfalls to avoid, and the numbers that convince their organizations to make the switch. Together, these fuels represent thousands of vehicles on the road today, supported by mature supply chains and incentive programs. And over the next hour, you're going to hear real-world thoughts from fleets, ports, and fuel supply leaders who have deployed each of these options at scale. As we stand now, I would love to introduce our first speaker, but just before that, I just want to mention a little bit about housekeeping. We're going to reserve 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. As Elizabeth mentioned earlier, if you have questions along the way, please drop them in the Zoom Q&A or chat box, and we'll address those during the Q&A period. Well, with that, I would love to introduce our first speaker of the day, and that is Brandon Cox, representing Propane Autogas. Brandon Cox is the director of Autogas at Alliance Autogas. Since entering the propane industry in 1996, Brandon has helped fleets of every size cut fuel costs and emissions by switching to propane autogas. He's going to share adoption roadmaps, real-world savings, and tips for building a turnkey fueling program with minimum disruption. Brandon, thanks so much for being here. Please feel free to take it away.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Appreciate the introduction. Again, I'm Brandon Cox with Blossman Gas and Alliance Auto Gas. So to start on the first slide, Alliance Auto Gas is the only entity in the U.S. that does a complete turnkey program from the technology side, which would be the underhood components, conversion and conversion centers, refueling infrastructure. So your all your tanks and pumps and dispensers, and as well as the fuel supply and maintenance. Next slide, please. These are some of the vehicle platforms that we have EPA certified conversion systems for. Many of you will see, you probably have one, if not many of these already in your fleet. Thank you. Next slide. This is just a snapshot or a skeleton version of the propane system and how simple it actually is. You start with the LP tank, which could be mounted in the bed, in the body in this case. Then we go over to the ECU, the control unit that pulls the information from the OEM side of the vehicle, and then it runs it through the EVAP or the EVP, which is basically like a regulator or reducer. There is a dash switch that will identify, that tells you how much propane you have in the system, or in case you needed to, you could turn the system off if you needed to go in for a different maintenance or something of that nature. Then again, there's fuel rails and injectors. It's a very simple system. Takes somewhere between 6 to 8 hours to upfit an existing gasoline powered fleet with this. At Alliance Auto Gas, we offer a 5-year, 100,000-mile warranty. As I mentioned earlier, we are EPA certified. So if you have an OEM warranty still intact, we do not void or disrupt any of that warranty, as well as you get our 5-year, 100,000-mile warranty. This is just a case study that severe driving, severe duty. I don't know how many of you are all out of Florida, but this is the Road Ranger program, which actually helps stranded motorists on the side of the interstate. Hopefully you haven't needed them, but if so, these vehicles drive over 120,000 miles per year in extreme conditions, heat, weather. And these vehicles, before they retire these trucks out, they have 600,000 to 700,000 miles, and many of these still have the original engines on propane. Anyway, this is a great case study, and hopefully, the next time if you do see one, you'll notice that they might be on propane. Just a little bit of snapshot of what the refueling infrastructure looks like. So ultimately, your gas or fuel supplier, in this case, Blossman Gas, would install the Alliance Auto Gas fueling system, which gives you 24/7 access. It's fuel management. It has its own fuel management capabilities with a fueling portal that you can log into. We use the K15 nozzle now, which is no PPE is required. It's a ultra low emissions nozzle. It just pushes on similar to that of like an air coupling or something of that nature. Very, very easy to, if you can fuel with gasoline or diesel, you can definitely fuel with this. We also have many private sites, but as well as public sites that you could use if you were interested in piloting a program in your area. I like to show this photograph just to show the size of the infrastructure. So that F-150, this is a single 1,000 gallon tank, and really it's not much larger than a single F-150 truck. So you're with the crash protection and everything, we're taking up about a parking space and a half. The typical model is we would install that 1,000 gallon skid that will cover up to about 25 vehicles in your fleet. It has telematics on it, so the gas provider, we would know how much fuel is in it, and we would put it on a keep fill basis. I just like to show this because of the size, and with 25 vehicles that could be fueled from just this one site. Getting into energy security, 99% of all propane is made in North America, so it cuts back on our foreign dependency. It's, we're giving back to the U.S. economy by doing this. It also cuts back on the fluctuation and the volatility of propane as a vehicle fuel. This is touching a little bit on renewable versus conventional versus the impact on the electrical based off of the CO2 that is produced by these 3 different fuels. As you can see, the renewable propane is quite a bit less than just conventional, but tremendously a lot less than the CO2 on the average grid for electrical to produce. That would be the fuels that are used to produce and what CO that they release into the atmosphere. And this is just a snapshot of how it's made. We basically take feedstock from a landfill gas, animal waste, dairy, and other sources of biogases to produce renewable propane. I'd like to mention RLPG North America will be selling over 15 million gallons of renewable propane in the year of 2025 and hope to have by 2030 over 700 million gallons available for production in 2030. That's all I have. Please feel free to reach out to me. That is my direct number and email address. Thank you so much.
Brandon, thanks a lot for all of your contributions. Folks, I just got to say, in East Tennessee, we worked with Alliance Autogas for over 20 years, working with fleets from school bus fleets to municipalities to private fleets. They are fantastic partners. They are one of the most knowledgeable propane, autogas, and alt fuels leaders in the game, and a true pleasure to work with. Brandon, we work really closely with Happy Fox, and it's always a pleasure to work with him.
Yep, spoke with Happy yesterday. Daniel, thank you for your kind words, and we look forward to hopefully partner on more projects with you and many others. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Our hope as well.
Thank you.
Well, next up, thanks again, Brandon. Chris Russman is our next speaker. Chris helms Florida Transportation Systems, the Tampa-based family-run bus dealership that has delivered nearly 13,000 school and commercial buses statewide since 1983. Representing brands like Bluebird, Braun Mobility, Microbird, Andera Motors, and ENC, he couples sales with full parts and service support. A longtime advocate for cleaner fleets, Chris has overseen over 700 propane, CNG, and electric bus deployments, cementing FTS's reputation as Florida's alt fuel leader. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Daniel, and thank you everyone for joining this morning's alt fuel conversation. Wish my name was Happy Fox after that last conversation, but no, glad to be here and happy to share some propane success stories. For those of you that know me, I chipped my teeth back in alt fuels back in the early 90s on vapor powered propane school buses. So for those of you that are familiar with that old technology, two things: I've dated myself, and I'm very grateful that customers continued with me after that. It wasn't very reliable and successful. But going forward today, first and foremost, I kind of want to answer what is propane and why should fleets consider it as a fuel source? And if we can go to the next slide there, thank you. I don't want to get too deep in the woods here, but some of the most significant considerations when we get into fuel sources is the fact that propane is a non-toxic, carcinogenic, domestically produced fuel that's inexpensive in comparison to its diesel and gasoline counterparts. Brandon just shared some of the various on-site options that help make infrastructure with propane a breeze. And fortunately for us in our balmy climate here in Florida, propane works in all climate types, be it hot, be it cold, be it mild. Additionally, it reduces fuel and maintenance costs while also reducing tailpipe emissions. And it does all of that without sacrificing any power or range in fleet operations. So again, an excellent choice for fleets. On the next slide, I mentioned how I started with propane and alt fuels. And back in the day, again, we really relied on some creative individuals to kind of push the edge and deliver some alternative fuel products. Today, with liquefied petroleum gas, autogas, we have many, many more options available to us. And again, just looking at this slide here, it really talks about the multiple vocations and industries that propane thrives in. We've got transit operations, school bus, delivery vehicles, RVs, trucks. Frankly, short of heavy-duty trucking and heavy-duty transit, there's very few markets where we don't find propane operating successfully. Next slide. And to that success and to that continued maintenance on the propane side, I want to share a slide from our partner, Roush Cleantech. Again, this just really shows the nationwide acceptance and deployments of these vehicles. It's getting hard to put a pin anywhere on the map to show someplace new where these vehicles are operating. And these are accumulating billions of miles of clean operation. The big takeaway I want you to get from this slide here is that it's more than likely we've got a peer or a colleague of yours somewhere in the state already operating propane buses. We're past those days of trial and error or pilot programs with propane. The good thing is, if this is something that interests you, we're more than likely able to find somebody that has a similar operation and can help validate the success of that operation. Next slide. And then the $1,000,000 question here, why do fleets choose propane? I'm going to break that out into 4 different categories for you, starting with operations. First and foremost, propane fuel and its infrastructure is extremely easy to introduce, like Brandon shared earlier. It's the easiest of the alt fuels to scale and grow the fleet also. And the propane-powered vehicles are available today with factory conversions on common engine platforms. Brandon showed a number of those name brands earlier with his slides, but that just adds to the familiarity for the drivers, familiarity for your fleet technicians, and it also provides readily available support avenues in the marketplace for the times when we do need field support. Additionally, from an operations standpoint, this new fuel still delivers the same performance, if not improved performance, than their original fuel source without adding a litany of new maintenance intervals or parts requirements. And most importantly, it doesn't add any of the expensive and complicated emissions after treatment systems that are required on diesel engines. From an environmental standpoint, propane allows for major benefits just from the clean fuel source. Less emissions, less hydrocarbons and particulate matter at the tailpipe in comparison to diesel. And the fuel itself poses no harm to groundwater, surface water, or soil. Specific to our own propane products, they're already EPA compliant for 2027. So again, something that gives comfort and a little bit of a warm fuzzy there that, hey, the vehicles I'm running today will meet future regulations and requirements. In regard to resiliency, propane gives the operators cost certainty and confidence as far as price stability. Through multiple decades, we're talking decades and decades, propane continues to trend well under the price points for gasoline and diesel. I believe Daniel in his intro mentioned that typically we see propane trending about $1.25, $1.50 under a gasoline gallon equivalent. So again, a price leader, and that allows for some budget neutral consideration. And additionally, we produce over 30 billion gallons annually. So this domestic fuel is well readily available and abundant. And last but not least, I want to add cost. Propane provides all these advantages to the fleet operators without giving them, a higher price point. The fuel is less expensive, but the vehicle, the upcharge, even to go from gasoline to propane, the upcharge costs are usually recovered in an extremely short window, and the operational and maintenance savings just continue to compound as they continue to run those vehicles for years of operation. And this slide here kind of really gives a good summary of those 4 bullet points. Really, there's a lot of options available to fleet operators today as far as what they want to run in their fleet. But propane really checks all the boxes from capital expenses to resiliency to route demands. It gives the operator really a good comfort level there. Next slide, please. And here's one of our in-state peers and colleagues that I'd like to use as an example here. This is Broward County Transit. They have been running propane cutaway buses in the paratransit operations for a decade plus. Broward County Transit frequently gives presentations on their experiences, and there's lessons learned with deploying propane. If you get a chance to catch Mr. Strobus, he does a great job with he's got some great videos of actually some safety experiences they've had to encounter and some deployment practices. So a lot to learn there. But in this chart here, they do a really good job of illustrating the operational savings that they're achieving with their propane deployment. Also, what they do is they break out savings in two different kind of columns here, both with and without the alternative fuel tax credit. And really, what I want to highlight here is even if we don't enjoy the alternative fuel tax credit that we have today, there is still a the math still works for propane. It is still proof positive that there are savings to be had. We're fortunate right now. We're enjoying multiple years of continued alternative fuel tax credit rebates. However, we have had years where it's skipped a year and then come back retroactively. But again, the math here illustrates that the cost savings exist with or without that fuel tax credit. And for the next slide, slightly different vocation, but again, similar experience. Indian River District Schools was our first propane deployment in the state of Florida for propane school buses. Actually, I think we've got them listening on the webinar today too. Specific to pupil transportation, the range and daily operation just makes perfect sense for propane buses. Lots of lessons were learned with Indian River's experience, and their success has helped, additional deployments throughout the state. Indian River just started with 11 buses on their very first order, and they've continued to update their fleet annually throughout the years. Today, they have 100% of their daily routes covered by propane-powered school buses. From a fuel standpoint, they're saving the district over 53% in their fuel budget. And then from a preventative maintenance and operations standpoint, they're experiencing a 71% savings in comparison to their diesel buses. And again, just one of the many examples of peers using propane and pupil transportation that we're happy to share here in Florida. We have over 1,000 propane-powered school buses running the roads daily in Florida at over a dozen districts, charter schools, and private schools. And again, in an era where school districts are looking to minimize their carbon footprint while not negatively impacting a tight budget, the propane school bus has proven itself to be a primary option for consideration. And I mentioned this earlier when we showed the maps and the deployments. Nothing I like better than being able to use a reference as a colleague or a peer to a fleet operator. It's one thing for me to say it's going to work, but when a counterpart can confirm that to them directly, to you directly, I just think that meaning is so much more impactful. I'm not going to read these quotes here that are on the screen, but I do like the one that is smack in the middle. And that came from the former director at Pasco County Public Schools. And I will read his. He says, "It's rather profound yet uneventful to say this bus is unremarkable. It does what it is designed to do. The operator has had little issue with the function, operation, or performance of this bus." I got that quote back from Tad after he ran the buses, and I kind of felt like it was an insult because I saw the word unremarkable first and foremost, but I had to read it a couple of times. But really, I think that's what I want to hear from a fleet operator. The bus is doing the task it is designed to do. From the district standpoint, he doesn't need to do anything different from a driver standpoint or technician standpoint. It just gets the job done. And again, they're bringing back savings to the district, win, win, win all the way around. Next slide, please. And again, I appreciate your time and your consideration this morning. Really enjoy the opportunities that propane transportation presents to everybody. If I can ever be of assistance, please do not hesitate to call on me. And again, thank you for your time this morning.
Chris, thanks so much again for that excellent presentation and going over so many of the details about how propane can benefit fleets. I loved how you touched on, the emissions standpoints of propane in particular, because there's evidence to suggest that diesel exhaust exposure lowers student test scores. By getting those emissions out of the bus, you're helping kids perform better. I will say when we engage with fleets in Tennessee, one of the first things we do is connect them with other experts, people who have done this again and again. And Chris, from your presentation, it's very clear you have done this again and again, and you have the knowledge to be able to help fleets with this. So I would recommend folks listen to Chris if you have questions about propane and want to explore what this looks like for your fleet. Sounds like he is a wealth of knowledge for you to explore and understand what your options are. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Daniel.
Our third speaker is Harlan Chadbourne. He is the Director of Purchasing for Waste Pro USA. With a Six Sigma background and decades of sourcing experience, Harlan manages a 3,000 vehicle refuse fleet that is steadily migrating to compressed natural gas and other alt fuels. He's going to demystify total cost of ownership analysis for compressed natural gas in the fleet and share how procurement teams can de-risk their alt fuels investments. Harlan, thanks so much for joining us today. Please take it away.
Hey, well, thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that. Well, just as an introduction, Waste Pro has been involved in compressed natural gas fueling since 2012. Our first station started down in Fort Pierce. And the next couple of slides and in the presentation, I'm going to echo several comments that and the same discussion points that were brought up by Chris and Brandon about CNG fuel, propane fuel. It has many benefits that are very similar to each other. There's also some tax credits and incentives for fueling, and explain the differences between what we're seeing in costs between diesel fuel versus CNG fuel, because when we do have those two options for our fleet. The majority of our fleet is diesel fuel, but with CNG fuel, we're leaning more in that direction because of the multiple benefits that we see taking place in there. On the next slide, here's a little summary of our costs that we have with our fueling processes. We currently have 8 on-site fuel stations, and our CNG spend is about $4 million per year. And on the next slide, I think we just got a few photographs coming up on this is Fort Pierce, what I mentioned earlier. And we also have another station this is in Palm Coast, Flagler. This is our only fast fuel station that we have, but it's nice and available to fuel to the public. On the next slide, it's a picture of construction. When you build a station, this is what is in the actual compressor compound. On the left is the compressor. On the right is what's called a dryer, where the gas is filtered through it and cleaned a little bit. But we have very high quality gas in Florida. On the next slide, we also do diesel, as I mentioned earlier. We believe that having fueling options on site are critical to providing fast deployment of our vehicles, and also having a stability of a fuel supply during critical times like hurricanes and other things like that might provide service or fueling disruptions. So we do install and work with diesel fuel as an option that we have at Waste Pro. On the next slide is a nice picture of some of the CNG fleet that we have, and we are currently have actually at the Waste Expo, we have 3 trucks out in Las Vegas on display right now, and they look really nice. On the next slide is just an example of a Class 8 truck where the CNG fuel tanks would be placed behind the cab of the driver. With a garbage truck as well, they're usually on the top or the back. So just a little example of the fuel placement of the tanks that fuel up the vehicles. On the next slide, it's a little example of the projects that we have going on at Waste Pro, and that we actually, Tallahassee is permitted, and we're looking forward to getting that project moving, and just some other projects going on with fuel tanks and trying to improve our fuel management processes as well with some automation. On the next slide, this is something that Cummins put together, but it echoes a number of things that were mentioned about propane, which is the noise level between the engines is significant. And actually, some of our customers, when we started going into this business, complained that they missed their truck because they couldn't hear the truck. They missed the garbage pickup day. But that's all changed through the years. They've gotten used to it. And as was mentioned earlier, there's significant fuel savings versus diesel fuel and gasoline. This type of cost differential between these fuels has been significant for many years now. And also, natural gas exhaust systems are cheaper and easier to maintain than diesel aftermarket systems. You don't have to use DEF fluid. So even some of the analysis I'm going to share with you in a minute is even in I don't even include the DEF treatment and the DEF costs when I compare diesel fuel. So that's an additional expense that makes CNG more of an attractive option for a fleet that's making that decision between, are you going to buy a diesel truck, or do you want to buy a CNG truck for your fleet? On the next slide, this is something that comes out of the transport project that put this CNG price advantage model together, and just shows what has been going on for many, many years. There's quite a bit of a delta between diesel and gasoline, and in a minute I'll show you what we're seeing with our internal numbers. We see the same chart, we see the same things, and as was mentioned earlier, I'll go back to that slide, just previous slide, please. At the bottom, it shows that we're getting about $1.34 is the average difference between CNG fuel and bulk diesel fuel. And bulk diesel at Waste Pro, that's our best price, okay, when we procure fuel. And so our best price of fuel versus the average cost difference is $1.34 between those two types of fuel. And if you had a federal tax credit, which again, as was mentioned earlier, we still see significant savings without the federal tax credit. But the benefit rises up to $1.84 between CNG fuel and bulk diesel fuel. On the next slide, this shows what goes into the numbers that I'm presenting. So when I say to you, hey, Waste Pro is paying an average of $2.27 for the cost of a diesel gallon equivalent of natural gas, all the cost components are shown in the breakdown above. So you can see we want to be able to say that if I'm comparing one fuel to another fuel, we're incorporating the depreciation, the excise taxes, the electricity, the maintenance, and as well as all the costs that make up what it takes to deliver the fuel to the property. And then the average cost for DG per gallon equivalent with the tax credit is about $1.77. Now, these numbers have stayed very similar since I've been tracking them for over 10 years now. Some years it's higher, some years a little lower, but we've been seeing these types of numbers for many, many years now. On the next slide, you'll see the deltas between diesel fuel versus natural gas. At the top level of the chart, you can see the different types of diesel fuel that we procured, retail, bulk. You can see where they were all tracking, and you can see where the differences are between the diesel gallon equivalent numbers at the bottom, which one has the tax credit in purple, and one does not have the tax credit in green. So you can see that the nice cost differential. And again, this type of chart, this type of data has been going on for several years now. On the next slide, I just put together a little example of how we benefit. So say, for example, Waste Pro had over 4 million gallons of diesel, CNG fuel, diesel gallon equivalents used last year. If Waste Pro had not switched over and we just continued to buy diesel trucks, we would have paid $5.4 million more in diesel fuel cost than we did in natural gas cost. So that type of data really helps Waste Pro to understand, or any company understand, that the benefits are very, very real, very solid numbers, and it's something to be considered when you're looking at going in the direction of an alternate fuel versus going in the direction of continuing with diesel. And of course, all of those gallons of fuel were clean burning natural gas. The next slide, just a little note about the tax credits that are out there. It has expired, but they're working to renew that. And it has been renewed since 2000, I think it's 2005 it came out. It's always been renewed, even when it expires every year. So we're very optimistic that even though it expired, 6 months, 12 months from now, could be 24. They can retroactively approve it, and then, which has happened at various times, it's taken 12 months or more for it to be reenacted. In the next slide, I want to explain a little bit about renewable natural gas. Waste Pro does take advantage of that. We do have the bulk of our fuel is renewable natural gas because we have stations, the 8 stations that we have on site. We are participating in the renewable natural gas process. So, but the offsite stations, we can't track that as well. But it's it's also benefited because, in a cash perspective to Waste Pro, because there's a RIN credit market when you transfer from natural gas that's virgin natural gas to renewable gas. You can participate with RIN credits, and that process has generated a significant amount of money back to Waste Pro, about 1.2 million, and it could be growing depending on the fluctuations of the RIN markets. On the next slide, renewable natural gas, 3.2 million were used in renewable natural gas last year. And this is a little quote that came out from the Argonne National Lab that says RNG is a low carbon fuel source that can be used in a variety of applications, and that it can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 95% as compared to diesel, giving it a nearly net zero carbon impact. And our fleet is about 20% natural gas right now. So we had a significant amount of fuel that was renewable natural gas at Waste Pro in 2024. On the next slide, just a summary to wrap up. As I mentioned earlier, RNG is a green fuel that reduces carbon emissions for the environment. We continue to benefit from tax credits and cost fuel reductions. And we also receive RIN credits as part of that process. And what's also, we're seeing that natural gas vehicles cost almost as much as a comparable diesel truck. So that helps us make our decisions, because the diesel trucks, again, have more maintenance in terms of the exhaust and the DEF fluid that's required, and the aftermarket regeneration to clean the fuel.
Harlan, have I frozen or have you frozen?
I think we lost him.
Hi, folks. My apologies. My internet just cut out for a moment. Am I back?
You are, Daniel. We can hear you, and I think we lost Harlan. So I think that was his last slide. Oh, or we can't hear him. I see him there, but feel free to move ahead.
All right. Well, Harlan, if you can hear us, I was smiling through that entire presentation. That is some of the most compelling presentation of data for a fleet that has adopted alt fuels that I have seen in a long time. What an impressive display of leadership on the part of a fleet, and the proofs in the numbers. I really appreciate the attention that Harlan paid to understanding really how does this benefit your fleet, because ultimately you're not, the environmental stuff, the emission stuff is amazing and deeply connected to the work that we do, but you're going to make decisions for your fleet most of the time based on what makes sense for you in terms of your bottom line. And alternative fuels, I hope you're seeing, can be a real tool to use to improve that bottom line for your fleet. Well, our last speaker of the day, last but certainly not least, is Corey Dibble. He's going to be talking about LNG, liquefied natural gas, and port operations. Corey is the Director of Public Safety and Security for the Canaveral Port Authority. Corey led Port Canaveral's transition to become North America's first LNG bunkering cruise port, and brings deep expertise in emergency management, regulatory compliance, and stakeholder coordination. He's going to walk us through some safety protocols and partnership models and other stuff about liquefied natural gas and how it works at scale. Corey, thanks so much for joining us today.
I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. We're almost to the afternoon, so we can go ahead and good morning. We'll go ahead and get kicked off. So really what I want to focus on today is obviously liquefied natural gas and how Port Canaveral became the leader in accepting this future fuel for the maritime industry across obviously across the nation. Europe's been doing it, but we went ahead and jumped in 2016 and started this planning effort. So we're going to talk through what operations we have currently in port, how we did it, the best practices, and some lessons learned. So our first LNG, liquefied natural gas bunkering operation. These are maritime assets that are built in the United States, and they are bunkering barges. Some of them are articulated barges, and they are chartered by the fuel provider, which the Q4000 was chartered and still is chartered by Shell. It's 324 feet length overall. We had to do a hazard and a sim-op. So for those that aren't familiar, as a hazard, we had this new future fuel coming in. Every partner available, every stakeholder got together, and we did a 3-day hazard, basically a hazard identification. What are the things that could happen? What are the things that need to happen, not only to prevent any issues, but to have a successful operation from the minute the vessel is offshore all the way to where it comes alongside. They do the hookup, they disconnect, and they depart. You had the Coast Guard in this hazard, the pilots, the vessel captain, the charter company, the receiving vessel, which is the cruise line, the port authority, obviously most important to the Canaveral Fire Rescue, which is our local fire department. And we discussed again, what are those mechanisms that we need to have in place to ensure a smooth operation? The Q4000 in its name has 4,000 cubic meters of potential for LNG. Its tanks can handle 21 days of pressure. It can handle before it has to have the boil off gas. What it will do is most of these charter companies are getting, so the Q4000 gets their fuel from Savannah, from Elba Island. It'll come down here into Canaveral. It'll fill the Mardi Gras. It was doing every Saturday. These cruise vessels are dual fueled, so they can do every other Saturday if needed. And then they will actually then go to Miami, fuel additional ships in the port of Miami, go back up to Elba Island, and continue the process again. They're transferring around 800 to 1,200 metric tons. And at first, this operation was taking 4 to 6 hours. The longest duration was the hookup. Now they've gotten this down to where this can take 2 to 4 hours. And that's made a seamless transition into basically a normal operation here in Canaveral, to the point to where they can quickly come in, they can do their fuel operations, depart from Miami, and we have no impacts to any operations. Next slide. Along with the Mardi Gras, which we brought in 2021, which was delayed due to COVID, our second vessel was the Disney Wish, again, LNG operated, LNG fueled, and we have the sister ship, the Treasure, which came last year. So that is fueled by a articulated tug and barge, the Clean Canaveral. That is 340 feet length overall. This would be our second bunkering barge that comes inside Port Canaveral. And they also do have a sister ship to the Clean Canaveral, which is the Clean Everglades, which for the most part operates out of Port Everglades. However, will come here and fuel if we have simultaneous fueling operations where we need 3 vessels. Same thing, we had to do a hazard. Although we were doing bunkering with the Mardi Gras and the Q4000, this is a different ship. This was a different bunkering barge. So we had to have the same hazard, the same discussion with the Coast Guard, all the same partners, to make sure that there was nothing that we weren't missing. This bunkering barge is slightly bigger at 5,500 cubic meters. Its tanks handle the same amount of days for 21 days before that the boil off gas is needed. They're going to fuel every other Friday at CT8. And they will also be doing the Wish on Mondays. And they're transferring about 1,400 metric tons. And this is, again, the same. It was a 4 to 6 operation at the beginning. Now it has become, again, a seamless and normal operation where it's taking 2 to 4 hours. Next slide. This was something new to us as we got very comfortable with the cruise industry. There was a thought of how to increase that for the cargo side. So we were approached by Shell. We were approached by the Q4000 to look into doing ISO tanks. And when we kind of heard some of the previous speakers talk about skid strips, so very similar process. You had the truck come with LNG. They would hook it up to the skid strip. The skid strip would then pump it into the bunkering barge. So the reason they were trying to do this is because of the small scale operations for LNG were staying domestic. And at the time, the large scale, and we are now, are currently being exported to Europe. So they were looking for a way of how can they eliminate the trip from Elba Island to Port Canaveral to Miami if they could bring the trucks here. Ultimately, they were doing 10 trucks a day, and it wasn't as efficient as they thought. They were going to plan to go up to 25 tanks a day, and that might have been good for the Q4000s. It didn't have enough to transfer into the cruise vessels. Again, it wasn't something that continued to stay within the port, and they quickly moved on after about 2 months worth of this operation, and then strictly focused on their same operation from Elba Island to the cruise vessels and back. Next slide. This is where Port Canaveral really led the way and how we work towards LNG. Number one, we brought this in 2021, and it was delayed due to COVID. We were expecting the Carnival Mardi Gras to come in 2020. What we had to do, we started planning for LNG acceptance in 2016. So we knew in sometime around 2020, we were going to have the first LNG vessel in North America. And so we had to sit down in 2016 and say, how do we do that? How do we bring in LNG? It's a future fuel. It's new. There's very little information from the Coast Guard besides the gas carrier side. So we said, how do we do that for the cruise industry? And number one, it started with public outreach. So we partnered with the Canaveral Fire Rescue Fire Chief, who is an independent agency. He does not report to the Port Authority. And getting with him and understanding how safe LNG is, having the same thoughts, the same process, pushing that out into the community. If you're not familiar with Port Canaveral, we have the community right on the other side, right on the south side of the port. We have restaurants, we have industry. So we had to go out to their HOAs. We gave them the ability to ask the craziest questions they had. We developed fact sheets to give them the exact specifics about LNG and how safe it is. We brought them into our commission meetings. We did this for 4 years prior to the acceptance of our first LNG vessel. And I can tell you, when they came to Jetty Park for the wave in and the wave out of the Carnival Mardi Gras, and the crowd saw no black soot coming out of the smokestack, they cheered, they were blown away, and they were, again, understanding that we were working along with the maritime industry to reduce our carbon footprint. Talked about the fact sheets. Again, just that specific information. We planned very early in the partnerships. We not only had these hazards, but we worked with the Coast Guard. We helped develop these policy letters alongside the National Center of Excellence for the gas industry in Houston, with our local Coast Guard here at Captain McPort in Sector Jacksonville, and our local MSU here. We had weekly discussions with Canaveral Fire Rescue and the Coast Guard, talking about what were we doing leading up to the first operation, and then subsequently, now that we've had a operation, continue to see it, what's going right, what's in an area of need of improvement, and doing this weekly. One other thing that we did, which is paramount, and we still are, but we're part of the Society of Gas as a Marine Fuel, which is a global board, and it's every Asia, Europe, United States, South America, and it basically, the main goal is future fuels and reducing our carbon footprint. We are on the board of directors, and we do a great job representing the port authorities and trying to standardize LNG operations and how it should be accepted across the globe, specifically the United States. Next slide. We have an STCW class here. We are lucky enough that Canaveral Fire Rescue has their own training facility here. They have their own firefighting academy. So when we were planning in 2016 for the acceptance of LNG, we were also looking at how can we further the training of our fire department. We went to Vancouver, where they were doing these operations, LNG operations with the ferries. We worked with them. We got the processes down. We brought that back to us. And we reached out to providers such as Shell and got mock valves. And we set up our own LNG burn pit to where our firefighters can not only see it, they can see what a water curtain does if there is an LNG issue. They can see that how easy it is to put out with a basic fire extinguisher. They can see the containment of LNG. They can see how to handle it. Rather than just classroom, we were able to build our own LNG burn pit for them to get to the real live demonstration. Next slide. One of the things when we went out into the community and we told them, although LNG is safe, we're going to look at mitigation measures. And what are those mitigation measures that we can do? And one of them was, we want to pursue a purpose-built fire vessel, 75-foot fireboat, that will be aimed specifically at LNG operations. So any first-time LNG operation inside Port Canaveral will require the LNG fireboat, Canaveral Fire Rescue Fireboat 2, to be along station in the event of an emergency. This vessel, again, 75 feet, has over 500 gallons of PKP, which is Purple K. If anyone's not familiar, that's the dry chemical for LNG emergencies. And it has the ability for 10,000 gallons per minute pumping capability. So this is required to be alongside on all first LNG operations. They coordinate with not only the bunkering barge, but the receiving vessel. And then subsequently, after they have proven that it's been successful, we've seen no issues, we will have the vessel on standby, and we will have it on station just in the event of an emergency need to respond. Something new that's happened over the last couple of years is we've had multiple operations of LNG go on at one time, simultaneous operations, 2 different bunkering barges, 2 different receiving vessels. So we'll have the fire vessel go back and forth, traversing, just again, in the event that there's an emergency. This was purchased through state funds, federal funds, and Port Canaveral also through our own $1.5 million to pursue this vessel. Last slide. Always lessons learned anytime you do something new. One of the biggest ones that we identified were incident notifications to the port can be delayed. When you're doing LNG operations, they have a laundry list of reportees if they have an emergency, if they have the minorest of issues. By the time it got to the port, we were low on the totem pole because they had to call the Coast Guard. They had to call the fire rescue. So by having the fireboat on station, we required them any abnormality, notify the fireboat. The fireboat will notify the Port Authority as they're notifying everybody else. That way we can get any additional resources on hand if there is an emergency that requires that. Port and first responders need to be involved in the approval process. We've brought them in from the minute. We have a permit to operate here at Port Canaveral, which requires all LNG bunkering operations to go through this process to identify that they've completed all Coast Guard credentialing. They have an approved Coast Guard emergency response and operations plan, as well as the Canaveral Fire Rescue approval. So we've brought them into the approval process for the permit to operate. Once they give their thumbs up, the Port Authority via the final approval will review and we'll give them that operational tag to come into the port. And then the last one, multiple organizations are involved in the LNG operation request. So it decentralizes that coordination. When we were doing the new operations and you didn't know who to reach out to if there was an issue, or they weren't sending their emails for their 48-hour notice, 72-hour notice for LNG operations to take place. We didn't know who to go through. Again, the new operations, now since we've done this, it's become normal. Everybody has followed in line, and we've implemented these lessons learned into our new practices. Thank you.
Corey, thanks so much for that. I'll be honest, in Tennessee, we're a little more landlocked than you folks are, and so going into this, I'll be honest, my experience with port applications of LNG was relatively limited. But thank you for that. Was great. I learned so much, and it really is kind of impressive and commendable the work that you've done to bring the port into the 21st century with fuel diversity. Um, you know, I walk into a grocery store and I can choose between, I don't know, 35 different kinds of salad dressing. I'm not going to put Catalina dressing on a Caesar salad. Fuel diversity works in the same way. There are applications for fuels that exist in the United States that are, cheaper, that produce American jobs, that support American energy independence, that can be used right now in your fleet that work better than the options that we've been used to as a traditional fuel in the United States. So thanks so much. And I want to move on to the opportunity for folks to ask questions now. Folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat for any of our panelists today. And I'm going to use my moderator authority to take the first question, and let's go through. I'll pass it to Corey first, and then we can go back through the line. My question is, what is the biggest misconception about your fuel? If everyone could just think of, what is that? What do you think people need to learn about for your fuel?
Honestly, the biggest question we got when we went out into the community was LNG. It's a bomb. It's going to go off, no matter what. Like, it's the most dangerous fuel imaginable. And then when we gave them the specifics and told them, it's flashpoint, and really just talked to them on a personal level, they were blown away. And they were like, okay, wow, well, it's not a bomb. It's not going to go off, right? And showing them the mitigation measures that we were putting in place with a fire vessel. Hey, if there was an issue, and we showed them the 1950s incident in Cleveland where there was a levee, and showed them that, well, that's because the tanks weren't built to the right standard. It wasn't due to the operation or due to the fuel.
Right.
So giving them the specifics, and I kind of say our community is very forward leaning for the fact that we do have NASA nearby, which is great. Obviously, they deal with a lot of different fuels and a lot of different chemicals. But going on their turf and getting that question out that it was the common question that LNG is the most dangerous fuel imaginable. And by the time we left that with the fire chief, and they see the fire chief does not report to the port, he doesn't agree with us on everything. They walk out there, we walk out, and they're smiling. And again, when they came for the wave out event and they see no black smoke from 3 of our ships now, I did want to mention that, I forgot. So we have the Mardi Gras, the Wish, the Treasure, the Utopia, and we will have the Star of the Seas in August. So we will have 5 LNG operated vessels, and not one other port has 2.
That's awesome, Corey. Thank you for that. We have our 5-minute window for the end of the webinar. I'm going to pass it to Harland. If you're still here, what's the biggest misconception about your fuel?
Well, I think that it's just the understanding the differential sometimes. Natural gas is used in homes. It's used in cooking and things, and it's lighter than air. And understanding the difference in fuel. I mean, propane is heavier, and it's also, as was mentioned, what some of the cause, just as was mentioned a minute ago, is what are the causes of some of the safety things, some of the issues. A lot of the equipment's, to me, all the safety standards around the fueling and the fuel tanks is solid, incredible. The fuel, just like propane, it's been out there and it's been used for many, many years now, and every year they up the safety features just a little bit more. So a lot of times when you hear accidents or you hear things, it's usually not the equipment. It's usually something human error related, or it's caused by something outside of the equipment functioning properly. So I think that's just some of the misconceptions, that the fuel is, any fuel can be considered dangerous. And if they don't understand it, the more they learn about it, the more they can get more comfortable with it. Just like, was mentioned a second ago from Corey about LNG. Okay.
Thanks, Harlan.
Sure.
Well, so I'm going to put my question on pause because we do have one question from our audience. Terry Carr asks, concerning threats to availability and logistics, does anyone have info on a report of a court ruling against LNG transport by rail? Corey, you might be the person who's most looped into this, so I'll pass it to you first.
Actually, I'm going to pass it back to you. I have no, I mean, when it comes to rail, the LNG, Port Canaveral does not have any rail systems out here. I know potentially maybe the Emergency Operations Center in Brevard could answer that question, but I don't have any information on that.
Gotcha. Thanks, Corey. And I'll be honest, neither do I. I have not read about that court ruling. If anyone wanted to put a link to that in the chat, I'd love to read about it and make sure that it is not a big deal. But it is not past my desk yet. Anyone else have any insight on that? Sorry, Terry. I wish we could be more help on that one. If there are no other questions from the audience, we can move to from CNG to propane about misconceptions. We'll move to Chris. Chris, what about you? What's the biggest misconception? Oh, Chris, you're muted. Sorry.
Got to learn that mute button there. I'd say probably two things with propane school buses. And first and foremost, you cannot run a propane grill off the propane school bus. It will not happen. Many have tried. It's still just not something that is feasible. And then in all seriousness, to what Corey said as well, there was always the comment and the misconception that you're going to be putting children on this bus. This bus could blow up at any given point. Hollywood has done us a disservice, I think, on some of their special effects. We enjoy them in the movies when they happen, but they don't necessarily translate to real life. But again, just to reiterate Corey's comment, it's really safety related, and the integrity and the safety of these vehicles is mind-boggling. It's we put nothing but care and concern in these vehicles as far as engineering and construction for safety. And after casual conversations, usually we can dispel those myths and misconceptions.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. We had another question from the audience. We have a question from Laura Betts, who asks, how does this compare to green hydrogen? Harland, I'll pass it to you. And then, folks, we're going to have to close out, unfortunately. We're at the end of our webinar time, and our panelists are full of knowledge, and I know we want to go on longer. Harlan, what do you think?
Well, actually, we were discussing hydrogen recently at the conference on that, and it boils down to cost right now. I mean, I don't I believe it's a very clean fuel. It's not that issue, but there's a lot of things around logistics of transporting it, how to get hydrogen to, and even California is having issues with supporting hydrogen, even though they have the largest hydrogen fleet out there in the country. But I think it's a great fuel. I'm a supporter of all different types of fuel. I think it's a clean fuel, but it's got a lot of logistical issues and transportation, and there's a lot of rules around it. So it's a new fuel. It's a little more complicated than some of the other fuels that we are very familiar with. So I think we just have to play it out and see how it goes, because it's very different. It is combustible, like all the fuels are, but There's special transportation issues and some other issues that are going on with it that make it a challenge right now. And it's also a cost issue. But like with anything, the more you produce it, the chances are much, much better that the cost will go down and make it competitive. So just got to give us some time. And I know that there's a lot of hydrogen projects going on in America, many, many hydrogen projects. So I think that we just have to sit back and see how it's received and how it gets accepted. But I'm supportive of it. I think it's going to be very interesting what hydrogen does in the next couple of years.
Thanks, Harlan. I appreciate the answer, and yeah, I think you're spot on. Um, Folks, I'm so pleased that you've been able to join us for the past hour learning about propane and compressed natural gas and the benefits that they can have in your fleet, both for your bottom line and for the communities that your fleets work in. Really appreciate your time. Folks have provided their contact information, and if you have any questions or want to follow up and start a discussion about how to implement an alternative fuel in your fleet, please do get in touch. These are some of the experts in the country about how to do this, and they are at your disposal to help you out and make these decisions that are best for your fleet and the people who drive those vehicles. Thanks again. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much to all of the organizations and people who put this webinar together. Really appreciate everyone's support, and it really was a fantastic team effort. Thanks, everyone, and please do get in touch if you have questions.